Welcome, Magnus here, and today we're going to talk about the 1DX Mark III, which was just basically revealed in a slight press release from Canon with some features, which these features that they just threw out there were a lot more than what Nikon was offering with the D6, so it was pretty interesting. And I first discovered this camera, or at least I first heard about it from a video from Peter Gregg, and that took me by surprise. I saw him upload and I saw his thumbnail, so you can. I left his card, so you can definitely subscribe to him if you check it out in the thing that showed up above. But in any case, when I watched the video, I was excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, Canon just did it. Did they really just do it? Did they release, or at least are they planning to release, a camera that has everything that we could want from a photos perspective and from a video perspective? That is what I'm looking forward to, and that's the question that I'm asking here today. So let's talk about it. From a stills perspective, I'm going to kind of gloss over that. It's definitely improved when it comes to speed. It's improved when it comes to memory card slots. It uses CF Express, 2 of them, and the buffer, I believe, can handle 5 times what the previous buffer could handle in the 1DX Mark II, and it could take 16 frames per second when you're using the mirrored, and if you're actually got the mirror flipped up and you're using live view, it goes up to 20 with autofocus enabled, which is huge. It's incredible, and it's definitely something that photographers should look forward to when it comes to this camera. So, but from a video perspective, for a long time, and actually the video that I'm showing right here next to me is a video that I had done previously when it was pretty much talking about Canon and why they haven't upgraded their cameras to compete with competition such as what's showing there, the Panasonic GH5, but also other competitors as well. And when Sony, for example, when it comes to full frame recording of 4K video or faster frame rates or incredible codecs, all of these video features that seem to be almost standard. I mean, I talk about the NX1 a lot on my channel, and the NX1 was very forward thinking, and back in 2015 it was using the full sensor, full APS-C sensor, but still full sensor of 6K resolution and downsampling it to 40K at up to 30 frames per second. Back in 2015, Canon has yet to do that in a full frame body. Granted, the 90D can use the full sensor for 4K recording in H.264 codec, but it took Canon forever to pull this off, which is a little bit disappointing when you think about it, because they were always last to the race. Camera Conspiracies is a channel that I absolutely love, and he's got a character that he created called the Canon Cripple Hammer. If you haven't watched this channel, you definitely should. And it's almost pretty much expected for Canon to always hold back features. Like a lot of the recent controversy with Canon cameras that they've decided last minute to pull back when it comes to a video perspective is that they took out the ability to film 24p in a lot of their newer cameras that they were releasing. And it didn't make any sense, because if it could handle 30p, why couldn't it handle 24p? And that's really, really the question. But now Canon kind of pulled back, and they're like, all right, we'll give you 24p in a number of these cameras that we released, including the EOS RP, which is basically Canon saying, we get it. We know what we're doing. Diana, it's nice and all, but possibly $5,000 to $6,000 camera. I doubt we see any of these in under $3,000 cameras unless someone got fired. You know what? To that, I think, and I wanted to comment on that. When the 1DX Mark II was released back in 2016, I believe it was around January, the 1DX Mark II had a lot of interesting features that they obviously weren't going to put into their less expensive cameras that they would release after that. So you're talking 60 frames per second 4K recording. And then it had 30 frames per second 4K recording in DCI format. So you had 4096 by 2160 pixels in that camera, plus the ability to do really fast frames per second in that camera. And that didn't seem like that would ticker down to the 5D Mark IV. And the 5D Mark IV didn't get the card slots. It had old card slots, but it did keep and retain the ability of recording 4K at least at 30 frames per second. So it didn't get the full frame rate, but at least got partial. But then Canon went above and beyond in their cheaper cameras by offering, starting with the 5D Mark IV, C-Log. And they never gave C-Log to 1DX Mark II. It had full functionality in the touch screen where you can go through menus and everything, where you couldn't really do that on the 1DX Mark II. So there were a couple of features that definitely were used and handed down to the less expensive cameras. And then when you had the 6D Mark II premiere shortly thereafter, sure, they took out the 4K, but they kept in the touchscreen ability, and they also added the ability to do time lapses in 4K on the 6D Mark II, as well as a fine codec for reduced codec on the 6D Mark II. But they added the flip screen, which the flip screen was not in the 5D Mark IV, nor was it on the 1DX Mark II. So sometimes they add, sometimes they take away. Peter Gregg, what's up? Thank you for joining the live chat as well. I gave your channel credit if you're still watching, so thanks a lot for that. But continuing on, so the 1DX Mark III, definitely exciting. But let's talk about the features that this camera is said to have that we've confirmed, and then other features that are still speculative, like we don't know what they're going to do. So one of the features that has me excited is the fact that it's going to do, once again, 60 frames per second 4K recording, but they're also going to come with log included, and that's the first time since the 1DC that you'll get Canon log in a DSLR body. Now the 1DC was used as primarily a cinema style camera, but in a DSLR camera body type of format. So this really is a next level of Canon saying, you know what, we want to take DSLRs, especially video and DSLRs, seriously again, because for so long us YouTubers have been saying that it's a darn shame that Canon doesn't want to affect their cinema line of cameras, and they kept on pulling features away from their DSLR cameras when you see other manufacturers just throwing in these video features. So from this standpoint, it's nice to see that Canon is like, you know what, let's throw everything in there with the kitchen sink. So they've actually got C-Log, 10-bit C-Log 422 at up to 60 frames per second internal recording. Now I don't know what you can do external, so off of what I assume to be a micro HDMI port or mini HDMI port on the side, I would anticipate. I haven't seen them do a full HDMI port there, but at least a mini HDMI port off the side. Will we get that same bit rate for external recording, like hooking it up to an Atomos Ninja? Who knows? But the competition is taking at least hooking up HDMI seriously. But this camera could do internal recording of C-Log, 60 frames per second. Incredible. But then they went the extra mile. A mile that I had discussed previously in one of, like, either the last video or 2 videos ago. I was talking about the fact that when it comes to like upgrading cameras and what you need to include for an upgrade of camera, nothing from a video perspective was impressing me unless you started to throw in the extra feature of raw recording. And that's something that, for example, Nikon has been taking seriously. Panasonic's taking that seriously too by offering raw recording external. But this is Canon saying, ha, we're definitely not crippling this camera. We're going to do raw recording internal. Now they're going to do their cinema light recording in this camera. And the cinema light is going to be raw, obviously, like I'm saying. But it's also going to be, if it's comparable to its other cameras, it's going to be 1 gigabit per second. Now this is where a concern comes in. So you've got dual CF Express card slots. Possible 1 gigabit per second if it matches recording like the C200. And that would mean that, for example, a CF Express card is about $200 for a 128 gigabyte card. If you're recording at 30 frames per second, from what I've looked up of that raw recording, that 128 gigabit card is gonna fit less than 20 minutes of video for $200, less than 20 minutes. Now you have to expect a high bit rate when you're recording raw, but ouch. How much are you going to have to spend? It's upwards of $600 if you're going to do something like 512 gigabytes. And even then, what are you going to get? Within an hour's worth of footage for $600? It's not bad, but it's kind of scary, you know? But having raw recording in a Canon camera, top of the line camera, is incredible. And that's something that I'm really excited about. The fact that Canon said we're taking this seriously and we're gonna throw that in there. So from that perspective, I'm excited for 1DX Mark III, because not just for the camera, which I don't think I'm going to be able to afford. In fact, I'm still hanging on to my original 6D and its minimum raw recording that I can get out of a couple of seconds, with the Magic Lantern hacked firmware that I've always used on this camera. But it's the start, because when Canon starts to put that in the top of the line cameras, the rest of their DSLR lineup starts to incorporate new features that started from the top and just trickle down. So this is like the next evolution. Back in 2014, Canon launched the 1DX Mark II. And like I was saying before, the 5D Mark IV got some features, but some features taken away, some features added, and then so on and so forth. So that was 4 years ago. 4 years ago from 2020, so almost 4 years ago. But 4 years before that was when the 1DX was released and the 5D Mark III was released. So it was every 4 years, and it's following that tradition, since Canon's not giving up on their DSLR lineup. But they're definitely mixing in, doing like DSLR mirrorless hybrids, and that's what it seems like they're aiming for. Diana, yeah, raw recording will be nice to see in more cameras for sure. I didn't fully understand the value of it until I saw your latest video on it. Yeah, I mean, raw video recording is basically what raw photos are to JPEGs. Raw video is to like standard like H.264 recording. There's no comparison. And the fact that you can just do so much with it is why it's incredible to record raw. The reason why I liked recording raw on the Blackmagic is because they've done an excellent compression with their Blackmagic raw codec. And a lot of that decoding or debayering of the video is done internally in the camera, so that when you're editing, it's a lot easier on your editing system, and the files can be compressed really small. I mean, the 12:1 compression on that camera for 4K recording was at a lower bit rate than the 5D Mark IV's MJPEG, and you get so much more data. And that's what I wish that Canon was able to do. I don't expect it, because I'm happy enough to get raw recording off of it. But if they could somehow figure out a better, leaner compression with their Cinema Light RAW, that would be just awesome. And Peter, that would be awesome too. We should definitely set something up and we could just chat live. I would love that and love to get that from you. We can plan that for a future video. We definitely got to do that. So, in fact, you heard it here first. We will have an updated episode with Peter Gregg, if you'll so do me the honor. But moving on, the 5D Mark IV, I'm hoping can hang on, and there he is right there. The 5D Mark IV can hopefully hang on to that ability to do raw recording, maybe at a reduced frame rate, 30 frames per second. And even then, I'm going to be super happy. And that's, I think, is what we all need from Canon's lineup, something to excite us. But what don't we know yet? We don't know if it'll have IBIS. We don't know, but I would bet that with a mirrored system, Canon's going to still hold off on IBIS. Now, they've expressed in the past that they're interested in doing IBIS into their camera lineup, but I have a feeling that they're going to stick that and maintain that IBIS, or in-body image stabilization, where, you know, prevents your video footage or camera from shaking too much when you're either recording or taking a picture where you need to be extra still. I think they're going to keep that in their mirrorless lineup, because to move the whole mirror and the sensor while you're shooting is going to be a little difficult, I would imagine. So I don't expect IBIS, but who knows, maybe they might surprise us. I've seen articles that they're actually interested in doing that. And another question is, will it have a flip screen? I've heard, of course, that, and Canon's has expressed, that they're going to keep the same type of body that the 1DX Mark II has. So not too much is going to change. I know the AF button is a little bit adjusted and it's going to do something different, and they haven't said what it's going to do, but it's interesting to see what they'll do with it. But as far as a flip screen, you'd almost have to change the entire makeup of the body and how it's designed, because you'd have to pull it out, you know, to flip it around. I don't see it happening, but Canon might do it. And they surprised me with this camera and with the specs that they announced in there, actually pulling ahead of the competition. So I'm absolutely amazed. We don't know if the 4K is going to be full sensor. I would hope that they do that. If not, I hope that the megapixel count is not anywhere above 30 megapixels. Keep it within the 20s. The 1DX Mark II was about 20 megapixels. So maybe 25, 26, you know, to upgrade, but no more than 30 if you're going to crop in the 4K footage. But if you're going to use the full sensor, then do what you got to do to use the full sensor. I would be pretty impressed if Canon finally released the perfect full frame 4K 60p available camera with log, 10-bit, and raw oh my gosh, that's awesome. So per Gordon Lang Images, no flip screen. Yeah, that's what I was assuming. That's what I was saying. There's not going to be any flip screen, I anticipate, but again, you never know. Also, when it comes to the footage that isn't log, what type of compression are they going to use? I would assume that they're going to use H.264 compression when it comes to the video footage, but a lot of new cameras, especially with a higher frame rate compression that they have for 4K, they're sticking to H.265 for any higher resolution, high frame rate. So H.265 has been around for years at this point. Like you see right there, the NX1 had H.265 compression back in 2015. Right now, if I ran an H.26 file off of this very computer that I'm using for this stream, it plays smoothly. I'm using a Samsung laptop too, so it helps Samsung to Samsung, right? But it's a lot easier now, at least with modern computers, than it was previously. And I don't have to re-encode the footage. It works natively with Premiere, and it's just, I've had no issues with it, and it plays smoothly. So it's a different world now than it was a few years ago. So that type of compression is actually pretty good. So Will they use H.265? I think it's a possibility. And I would actually hope, because then it also saves space. Though it's, again, we're taxing on your computer. It'll save at least memory card space for those expensive CF Express cards, which is, you know, par for the course. But as far as anything else, that's it. Now, what this means for the industry, in my personal opinion, is that we're going to see Canon continue to support their EF glass, continue to support their DSLR cameras for a little while, because they're still number one when it comes to full DSLR bodies in the industry. And in order to maintain that large amount of pretty much consumers that are Canon loyalists, they're going to have to continue to support them, but by building a dual hybrid mirrorless but DSLR camera that kind of does both but shows you the features of what you can accomplish with mirrorless cameras. That's why you'll see faster burst rates, maybe silent shooting when it comes to taking pictures when you have it in live view. Then you'll start to see them say, hey, you know what? I like shooting in live view better because I get some features that I don't get, but I don't like looking at the back of the screen. I want to see it through here. Maybe I should get a mirrorless. And then you kind of slowly progress them into getting mirrorless lineup. And then at that point, Canon could just say, all right, we're done. We're done here. No more DSLRs. We've got nice adapters. Just move into mirrorless line and go from there. And they did express interest in upgrading their mirrorless cameras and getting them a little bit more beefed up. So that's exciting. That's it. That's basically it. If you guys have anything else you want to say, just leave it in the chat right here. I'll definitely address it right now. Any questions or anything? I think, Diana, you were definitely the star of this live stream, so I thank you very much for joining. And Peter, I definitely will call you shortly, and then we should set something up for one of these live shows, which I would be more than honored to have with you. But if there's nothing else, you guys can always leave a like and subscribe if you've watched this, and I'll of course re-upload it so everyone can see. But as always, like, share, and if you haven't already, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later. Take care. Now, where's that button to stop this stream? There it is. Bye-bye.